You'd think after all these events I'd know how to turn on a mic. Welcome, everybody, to RSCA M5. I really appreciate you all being here. This is our final RSCA M5 of the academic year, and I think it's fitting that it's capping our inaugural research week. For those of you who I've seen at lots of events, I appreciate. We have 8 events across the 5 days, and we're really excited to bring our faculty and distinguished guest here to talk about their research, scholarship, and creative activity on human factors. This is our flagship dissemination series. We have people online watching, we have people in person, and it really provides an opportunity for us to think about a topic deeply and see it from multiple angles. So I want to thank the faculty presenting today, and I also want to extend my deep gratitude and welcome to our 2 NASA presenters who are joining us today to share their research along with our SJSU faculty. Thank you. So today we're discussing human factors, and we've been showcasing amazing work all week, right? From our students to our faculty to our staff. And human factors is at the center of everything SJSU does in our RSCA enterprise. We have a long existing relationship with NASA Ames, where this is central to that relationship. And this encompasses everything from how humans interact with technology to behavioral work to human-centered design. And we're at the forefront of this, and we're happy to share this topic and learn more today. So these faculty and researchers today are exemplars of some of the best research we're doing, and we're really proud of them. So as the public research university of Silicon Valley, fitting that we've been able to build this strong relationship with NASA and our federal partners. The partnerships with the Ames researchers and the collaborations that take place both on the Ames campus and here at SJSU are the driving force behind the strength in human factors. I want to thank, beyond the 2 presenters here, I want to thank NASA in general. They've been a great partner this week. We had NASA representation at our grad slam. We also had NASA here to kick off the week at our innovation showcase on Monday. So I'd now like to turn it over to Laxmi Basubrahmanian, the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Social Sciences, to kick us off. Laxmi?
Can I just put it back in there?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Hi, everyone. You hear me? Okay. So, good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you here today and kick off this series of interesting presentations related to human factors. I am not an expert in human factors, so I'm really eager to learn more chatting with you today and listening. But I wanted to provide a bit of context for my remarks. I'm a professor of urban and regional planning. I'm formally trained in architecture and with a focus on environmental psychology, and I do research on participatory geographic information science. Now that's a mouthful. So my own academic work brings together the rational technical configurations of a particular set of theoretical and computational frameworks were developed in computer science and geography with software and trying to use that to do community development work. And connecting our human aspirations and values with GIS maps and data is no easy task. In my field, we're constantly reminded that our work in shaping the built environment can become irrelevant in that the places that we create can be unused or underutilized. And even worse, they can create physiological and psychological trauma for our communities. So one of the major disconnects that we're told happens is that as designers and planners, we haven't considered human factors in our research, our planning and design. Again, I'm not an expert, but from my vantage point as a relative outsider, it appears that human factors research and engineering has tended to frame research questions rather narrowly, in that how can we minimize or manage the risks caused by human action or inaction that cannot be carefully calibrated or pre-programmed through technological means. Now, that might be my outsider's view of the issue, and I'll be happy to stand corrected. The phrase human error often encapsulates a multitude of implied criticisms that can range from an individual's behavioral responses, their mental state, or their inability to safely navigate through a designed built environment. Think about railroad accidents, for example, and we've had a lot of them in the past few months. So I'd argue that we need to expand our own theoretical frames as we see deeper human computer and human technical systems integration in many diverse fields. Some of these integrations are so ubiquitous that they're hardly noticeable. And human behavior is continually being modified and adapted by technological innovation. Humans are pretty good at adapting to social technological change, especially when it makes their day-to-day living more comfortable. Yet, their own adaptability may inure them to risks that they are exposed to when technological systems don't behave the way they're expected to. As a planner, I'm now thinking of that ubiquitous service that you all use, and I sometimes use, that Maps program you have on your phone. Um, it seems to me that people have become hyper dependent on the Maps program and interface, causing a steep decline in spatial reasoning. That seems a dominant problem among Uber drivers. Um, one user group. I'm happy that the academic scholars presenting here today are actually indeed doing what I'm asking for, expanding, reframing, and challenging established understandings of what it means to do human factors, human technology interactions research. They're considering impacts on human biology, the need for sleep, to considering interactions between human computer interactions in classroom settings, and the challenges of humans using self-driving vehicles. Other scholars are considering the impacts of gender and culture and how to advance improvements in process workflows, and more importantly, creating safe human robot interactions. So I'm really excited to hear what our colleagues have to say, and I look forward to chatting with them later. Thank you.
Thank you, Laxmi. I really appreciate that. In order to preface our talks, I'd like to introduce Anna Dizak to you as our MC. Anna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Dizak, and I am your MC today. I am one of three research development specialists in our Division of Research and Innovation. I primarily support the College of Science and the College of Education. My two fellow research development specialists are here. Barbara Sasso primarily supports the College of Engineering, and your timer here at the front, Bridget Brown, primarily supports the College of Social Sciences, the College of Arts and Humanities, and the College of Public Health and Human Sciences. So first, we'll go over some brief housekeeping today with you all. You are allotted 15 minutes to speak today, so it's RSCA 15 today. And you'll have 5 for Q&A as well. To advance the slides, you'll have a clicker and you'll push the down arrow. We will alert you when you have 3 minutes left and 1 minute. So look at Bridget for cues. And then the thank you slide will appear when your time is up. Please wrap up immediately. Also, as an FYI, this mic is not attached to the podium, so if you need to move it, please brace it, or to take the microphone out if you want to gesture to your slides. For everyone that's in the audience, live stream and in person, there will be a 30-minute break halfway through the presentations for lunch. Please raise your hand for questions if you're in our audience. We will not be taking questions from the live stream audience today due to streaming delay. We are recording today's events, and if in-person attendees need to leave, please try to do so during the applause. Next slide. Thank you. So here is a list. Here's a list of our speakers. If you're in the audience, you can scan the QR code to the right to get their biographies. So with that in mind, let's turn it over to our first speaker, Gaojian Huang. His presentation is titled Next Generation Human Machine Interface in Automated Vehicles for Universal Drivers. Welcome. And Lauren has the clicker for you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for attending this RSCA in 5 event. Um, so since this is the first presentation of the day, I want to express my idea of human factors. So human factors is actually everywhere in our life. Think about in this room, the height of the chair, the height of the table, the color of the wall, even the font size of the PowerPoint. These are all related to human factors, right? So today I'll use the framework human automation interaction to explain my research, what research is conducting in my research lab. And sorry about my voice. I think I got sick, but I don't know what kind of virus is in my body, so stay away from me. All right, so my research mainly focused on 3 areas: human automation interaction. And then for human aspect, I mainly focus on mental states. For example, imagine we are sitting in the automated vehicle, and then nowadays we don't require to monitor the driving environment all the time if the vehicle is reliable enough. And we can be in mind wondering, think about something else. So that's one project funded by RSCA Level Up Grant last year. Um, and then we can also be in fatigue or sleepy state, or we can be emotional, or we can be distracted by other tasks. So we can read a book, we can write emails. So all these different mental states can have impacts on our ability to understand what's going on the road. And so my goal is systematically build a system to predict the impacts of these mental states on the driving performance. And then in terms of accessibility, I focus on aging and the people with disability. So I'll give more reasons when we go to next slide why I focus on accessibility. But yeah, so these are the main focus. But it doesn't mean that I don't focus on like younger adults or other demographic groups. But aging and the people with disabilities are really the group can be beneficial of the technology advancement. Um, and for the automation part, for most of my research, focus on the transportation domain, mainly in automated vehicles. And most of my funding are related to automated vehicles, such as Honda Research Institute, National Science Foundation, US DOT, or Mineta Transportation Institute. Uh, but I also have some research related to the public transit. So for example, the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on older adults' travel behavior. Um, and for automated vehicle, what we really want to achieve is human-aware automated system. So people have different preference, different trust in automation. Uh, and so how do we adjust vehicle driving behavior to meet humans' preference? So if human drivers, they prefer a more aggressive driving style, and how do we identify that need and then adjust the vehicle driving style to meet human preference? And then at the same time, we don't sacrifice the safety. So that's the main concern and the main goal to achieve. And then in terms of smart home and healthcare, uh, I have collaborations with professors within the College of Engineering and also a professor at SJSU, such as in business school, focusing on how to develop wearable and teleoperated robots to help people in their daily life. Um, that's also funded by SJSU College of Engineering Small Group grant. And then my third domain is interaction part. So again, I want to use a vehicle as the example. So in a vehicle, we can use visual, auditory, and tactile displays distributed in our 3 different sensory channels: visual, auditory, and tactile. For example, we can use auditory augmented reality on the windshield to present the information, or we can use auditory signals, or we can vibrate on the seat. So imagine there's a car approaching to our vehicle, and then if the vibration on the seat can let us know there's a car approaching, in that case, even if we are distracted, we can still understand there's some other information we need to pay attention to. So that really facilitate the communication between human and machines. So these are the three domains. And so today I want to present a few or a group of studies in this human automation interaction domain, and with an emphasis on automated driving and aging. Uh, so first, I want to introduce the takeover model. So why this is important. Again, we are now sitting in an automated vehicle, and it's partially automated, of course. It can not handle all the driving scenarios. If there's a construction zone, if there's a lane marker missing, or if weather is not very good, not visible enough, and then the vehicle can no longer handle the driving task itself, and it will require human drivers to take over control. So in that case, the vehicle, once they detect for example, the construction zone, and then they will send a warning signal. We call it takeover request. So it can be visual, it can be auditory, it can be tactile. And then many of my research focus on how to better design this takeover request in different modality, and to better inform drivers the need to take over. But once they perceive and process that information, the signal information, what's next? So now drivers need to go through this cognitive processing and the decision-making phase. So in that phase, people need to look around and then see what's in the driving environment. So so many information, right? We want to know what's the current speed limit, whether or not there are pedestrians. So if there are surrounding vehicles, what's the speed, what's the location of these vehicles, and so on and so forth. So much information we need to collect in a such short time period. At the same time, because drivers need to take over, they need to move their foot on pedals, gas pedal, brake pedals, and then hands on the steering wheel. And then they need to make decisions. So do we want to drive into the left lane, right lane, slow down to avoid pedestrians? All these decisions should be made. Then finally, the plan should be executed. So we don't want to like have an immediate steering wheel change to like make the passengers have a very bad driving experience. So we want to slowly move, make everyone in the vehicle very comfortable, and we want to avoid any collision risk. So all these different steps happen in a very short time period. So my research focused on the human machine interface, for example, using visual, auditory, and tactile signals to not only warn the drivers, and also throughout the entire phase, how to use these three types of displays to help drivers fasterly collect information from the driving environment and then make the decision. Um, and now goes back to the topic of why I focus on age. So here, each line represents one age group, and the pink line here represent people who are 65 or over. As you can see, the trend older adult group have become the fastest growing group in the world. Um, However, one thing many researchers or many of us have ignored is the individual difference. So let's say two people at the same age, 75 years old, and then one person can perform tasks in complex environment very well, but the other person can barely move. So that's very common in our daily life. And my research also is interested in what's the factor that can lead to that individual difference in terms of performing tasks in complex environment. Um, so here are findings. Um, so the first thing is, so the first part I examined is the warning signal. So again, I use VAT as the takeover request warning. So as you can see here, the y-axis is the response time, and then x-axis are 7 different types of warning signals. So it can be combined visual, auditory, and tactile signals all together, or visual, tactile, auditory, tactile, or single tactile signal, single visual signal, auditory signal. And then what we found is the fastest, the 4 signals that are associated with shorter response time were uh, VAT, VT, T, and AT. They all have tactile component. Even though we can see the combination of multiple displays is very beneficial, but including tactile signal is really important. Um, but that's only for the learning phase. And then for the follow-up, so my recent NSF funded project, we also focus on like how to design the VAT displays in the later phase of takeover. And then what's also interesting is here. So the comparison between younger and older adults in terms of the decision time, making time, and then the driving performance. So the second graph shows how comfort the driver have when they control the vehicle. And then the first one is how fast they can make decisions when they need to take over. And then what we found is for the exercise group versus non-exercise group, the difference between younger adults and the older adults are different. So when people are actively perform physical exercise each week, younger and the older adults, the difference is much smaller than people who don't do exercise. The same thing for this driving performance measure. So that implies physical factor can be one of the factors can lead to that individual difference for performing tasks in complex environment. But there are other factors, cognitive factors, whether or not people are reading books every day, play card games every day, or social factors, whether or not people have attend social events every day or have more family members living with them. All these factors can lead or maybe can lead to individual differences. So that brings my future research plan for human automation interaction. I want to continue to systematically build mental states to try to predict the impacts of mental states in the driving domain, and then develop more intelligent, human-aware automated system to better adjust their driving behavior based on humans' needs, as well as the multimodal display, the combination of visual, auditory, and tactile displays to better communicate with humans. And then for the aging and the technology domain, non-chronological age, I want to build a framework. So not only include the physical activity, but also many other factors, social, cognitive, and to better predict person's capability or ability at later stage of life, and develop assistive technology such as wearable device using tactile information to help people navigate or to communicate with the interface. And for the teleoperated robot and wearable system, I want to develop some wearable device at the smart home, like help people with mobility issues, help them to engage their daily activity. And then lastly, the teleoperated robotic system. For example, a truck drivers, they can maybe one day they can control the vehicle at home, and then they have a lower safety risk, but at the same time, they can still perform the task. So these are all my future plans. And if you have more questions, if you want to follow up, you can scan the QR code, visit my lab website, and then we can have more discussion over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wong. So do we have any questions from the audience for Professor Wong?
Thank you for that presentation. Very interesting. So you focused on the impact of age on the performance, which I think makes a great deal of sense. But as you were explaining the study, it occurred to me that if we're living in a world of what I would call semi-automated vehicles, because you do have the humans taking over during crisis situations, Is it not also the case that the people who are doing this for a long period of time will have a deterioration in their driving skills because they're not doing it all the time? They're only doing it during these crisis events. And how does one take that into account in designing these human machine interfaces?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. So, in addition to the technology part, what we can do in terms of the design, and then there are many, like I'm thinking like the policy requirement as well. So now, when we talking about like getting a driver's license, we only test the manual driving skill, and then one day maybe like we should involve the takeover skill as well. So we proposed one project collaborate with Dr. Lin Jiang from mechanical engineering, and then we are so it's funded by Honda Corporate Foundation. So it's a pretty exciting project that we try to develop some wearable gloves. So for example, a skilled driver when they drive the vehicle, and then the machine or robot they can memorize the force from the steering wheel, and then for young drivers or some inexperienced drivers when they learn takeover or when they even if they don't do the test but they just sit in the vehicle, how do we have a vibration or tactile display to let drivers understand what they need to do? So just use different like interface to let them know now you should put a higher level of force to control the steering wheel, such that. Yeah, so I think at least if this is really important, I think in terms of policy, it should be required one day. Like we should know how to take over, and then once people passed the takeover skill test, then they can get a license and then drive a semi-automated vehicle.
Can you go back a couple slides to where you had the graphs?
And we,
Yeah. One more. Okay, so looking at the slide on the top right, I'm curious, and I don't know what your N was, right? But I'm curious. I see that for your older participants, having being the top right, being active was positively associated, at least slightly, with being better able to take over. But for your younger participants, it seems to be the inverse. Am I reading that right? So inactive people actually seem to score better on the takeover task.
yeah, so within the same group, actually, in terms of the statistical analysis, we don't find the significant difference.
Yeah, and so I'm curious as you think about these, obviously the more results as you think about the sort of different vectors to think about human performance, right? You showed in one of your slides age is sort of a crude metric, and this, you're trying to sort of dive down deeper into finding ways to sort of separate out what are the types of factors that you're looking at. I also, it struck me on your fastest growing demographic chart, some of those age bands were 4 years, some were 10, some were 40, I think, and then there was infinite, I guess, 65 plus. But where do you start to make those? How do you start to paint a fuller picture of the factors that might help us better understand people are going to struggle with these kind of tasks and people who aren't?
Yeah, yeah. So good question. Basically, what we notice is the more we are thinking about this, the more factors we're like thinking maybe they can play some impact on or lead to different driving performance. And so that's also a great opportunity for all human factors researchers to dig into this domain and then find out more. So for me, I just start with some daily factors, physical, cognitive, and social, and trying to see these three big domains, which almost include all daily activities, and then that can make a difference. But there are more like factors, such as you mentioned, like people above 65, and then until 95, 100, and then such a big range, and then like old. So people can also have a like age-related difference even for the same older adult group. So yeah, many factors to investigate, and yeah, and that's also very good for researchers because we see all the opportunities.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, so actually, one study we conducted last year was comparing different locations as well as different intensity and the patterns. So, yeah, that's another interesting part is we want to know like when people are performing different secondary tasks, and then how do we adapt the tactile signal types to meet people's needs. So when they are watching videos in the vehicle, and that's definitely different than when people are playing games in the vehicle. So yeah, and then we find so at least for the steering wheel, because people no longer need to touch the steering wheel all the time, and then so we may not put the tactile signal on the steering wheel, but we are considering like wearable like device as well, and then we also compare the C back and the C pen. It end up with we didn't find the significant difference there, but there are many possibilities, not just human nature, but it can also be the design of our experiment, the design of the driving scenario. So yeah, lots of many new experiments going on, but we definitely are comparing the effects of these different parameters.
Wonderful. Well, again, let's thank Dr. Wong.
Thank you. And yeah, sorry, I have to leave. My student is presenting in San Diego this afternoon for the CSU competition, so I want to fly there to support her. So yeah, if you want to follow up, please email me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank
Yeah,
you so
see you
much.
around.
That's very exciting.
Oops.
Perfect. Wonderful. And I saw your haptic technology there at Startup Showcase. That was really cool to see all that in play this weekend. All right. So next up, we have Dr. Damon Moon with our answer to Chat GPT.
Good morning, everyone. Just one minor correction. I'm not a PhD. I don't have a doctor, but I'm here to present some of the research that I conducted in my classroom. So how do we respond to ChatGPT? Let me start off with a story of one of my students. I'll call her Amy. Amy is a first generation transfer student from Central Valley. Um, she was really excited to come to the in-person classes uh, right when the pandemic, the isolation and the restrictions were being unrestricted. So she was really excited. And when we were walking out of the classroom, I asked her a casual question. So, how's life? How's life outside the classroom? She hesitated. So I sensed that something was off. It turns out that she was in the ER for mental health reasons. So I sat down with her and wept together. So that had a profound impact on me on how I think about my teaching. So when we look at the post-pandemic reality, uh, in the classroom, students are afraid to talk to other people. They are comfortable staring at the screen, scrolling through and swiping and maybe pressing some buttons, but they're not familiar with talking to other people that they have never talked with. And this presents a deep loneliness problem that Amy had. And outside the classroom, students are using tools, AI tools like ChatGPT to complete their assignments. They're not asking their peers, they're not asking the professors, they're not asking the tutors. Of course, there are these movements, but not as much as they used to. They're looking at the online resources to complete their assignments. So the big question that we have in the academia is, what do we do with ChatGPT? Should we allow it? Should we ban it? Should we allow them to use it for more creative reasons? Or should we discourage it and try to find a way to detect this more effectively? So as a result, the professors find it very challenging to engage the students. Um, I thought it was just me, but when I ask the professors on the campus, they all express the same thing. It's not as same as it used to be before. I think there is a kind of ongoing behavior post-pandemic. So what's the root cause of all of these issues? I believe it's not the modality. It's not just the in-person versus Zoom versus asynchronous. It's the idea that the students are not talking to one another like they used to. The sheer opportunity to interact with other people has shrunk tremendously. And this is consistent with the reports, a lot of reports that are coming out. Dr. Vivek Murthy, US Surgeon General, he created a whole report on the mental health issues of adolescents. Healthy Mind Study, this has been going on for 10 years, and the results of that study is absolutely shocking. 41% of students, today's college students, are diagnosed with depression, 34% with anxiety, 11% with suicidal ideation. So, as an entrepreneur, as someone coming from the industry with new ideas, I thought it would be nice. I needed to create an experience. I needed to do something. So I created this experience, the in-class experience that would help and nudge the students to talk to one another. So my classroom, every single class starts with this ritual. So when the class starts, or actually before the class starts, there's music playing. So as their students are walking in, bright and elevating piano music playing on the background, so they have smiles on their faces. And as they're walking in, they're presented with a question. For example, what skill would you most like to learn? Or other questions like, if you were to teach something, what would you teach? So I'm going around the classroom asking other students to close your laptops, put away your phones, find someone to talk to, and ask them this question. And of course, I have the timer going on so that I know exactly when the class is going to start. So that's the first thing that I created. The second thing that I created is calling the students by their names. When we ask people to participate, it's always the same three people raising their hands. So what would it be like to draw the students in who are in the back, maybe looking at TikTok videos, maybe doing something else, doing other assignments? I'm glad they're at least here in my classroom, but I see people dozing away. Maybe we need that tactile feedback for those people who are dozing off. But this way of how to call them and draw them in by calling their name, hey, Leon, what do you think about the question or the conversation that we had? What do you think about what should the CEO do? And Leon would stand up and share his answer. And then I can award the participation points based on the quality or the quantity of the participation. And the third thing is I track all of that information and then visualize it so that students know where they're standing in terms of participation. And that really changed the interaction, the classroom dynamics. 90% of my students are saying that they made a new friend. So I did a study after doing this, after the semester. About 68% respondents, 171 students responded, and this is what they're saying. 89% of them say they felt much more motivated to come to my class. 88% said their team dynamics were much better. 80% they felt much more motivated or comfortable to raise their hand and speak up and share their opinions. I had seen high sustained attendance rates, and even the final exam grades were higher. And more than these stats, I love what the students were saying. The students felt uh, pleasantly nudged to interact with other students. So they are coming to the class and making friends, and that created a positive perception and experience. And also, they like the fact, contrary to the traditional belief that people would feel anxious if I call in their names, but they actually welcomed being called upon, so they don't have to raise their hand and volunteer to answer those questions. So that leads me to Alex's story. Alex is a student. He is from East Africa, and his dream is launching his own logistics company. So one day, on my Zoom office hours, he jumped into my Zoom call and he said, "Professor, I just want to say thank you." I said, "What's going on, Alex?" I had an interview with my dream job and I got it. I got it because you created that experience of asking people to interact with one another and be able to answer those questions. So when I walked into the interview room, I was comfortable. I felt confident interacting with the people that I did not know and being able to answer the questions that were posed randomly in the classroom. So, Professor, I just want to say thank you. So, Alex's story really moved me on his experience with the interviews. So the conclusion that I have here is, yes, the live verbal interactions increase friendship, increases motivation, increases learning outcomes, and it could even help students get better jobs prepare there for interviews. So right now we are living in the world of AI and ChatGPT, and this is where we have all of these assignments. So consider reducing the amount of written assignments and instead give live feedback and peer interactions in the classroom, because this is something that the computers won't be able to do. So ChatGPT is here. Uh, it's inevitable. I don't think we should fight it. I think we should embrace it. And instead, teach them and nudge them more so that they know how to be more human. Thank you.
Thank you, Damon.
I'll take more questions.
Yes, please. Questions? Oh, wait, Lisa has a question.
Do you plan to do ongoing research on this theme and topic with future classes?
Yes, I plan to do ongoing research with more people, more professors. So I'm looking for additional professors and classes so that they can. So it's not just my own classes, comparing pre and post, but also other professors in different disciplines. So I do would like to do that. So if you're interested, please let me know. We can talk more about it. And also, I am getting connected with people in the neuroscience area. So how the social interactions impact the brain, and start setting up the research plans for that. So thank you for your question.
Can we go back to the slide of Alex? What I'm noticing is that you've got a photo credit. I love to see that. That's not Alex.
It's not Alex. Alex is that's not his real name. Yeah.
Right. Just an observation. Let's work on getting a picture of Alex.
Yes. Okay.
We can work on
I'm
that.
here for you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
I'm curious. I think it's a timely topic, obviously, especially coming back from the pandemic.
Yes.
And I think it translates beyond the classroom. And a lot of what you're sort of the backbone of it is soft skills, what we call soft skills,
Mhm.
but I think we all know they're hard skills as well. And also face threatening acts and some of that stuff that comes out. I'm going to pivot. My question's
Yes.
actually, is this just live classes, or are you also doing this on your virtual classroom, those kinds of things? And do you think these kind of methods allow for hybridity, or is it really sort of a call back to the classroom?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very important and timely question. Many college campuses are considering, or at least launched, online version of their existing classes. So the idea here is increasing the opportunity to talk and to have that live interaction. So what does that mean? So in the live classes, the traditional classes, how can we increase the live interaction through what we just shared? So that's one. And two, that could also be just applied to the Zoom classes. So when I ask the students, it wasn't about in person or Zoom class, it was whether they had the opportunity to speak. So if it was a Zoom class and it had a lot of breakout groups, or they had the opportunity to speak, it works perfectly fine. Actually, they enjoy it. My SOT scores were actually higher on Zoom than the in-person classes. So I was actually surprised to see that. Now, on the asynchronous aspect, I think that's a significant challenge. So as far as I understand it, the current asynchronous modules or classes in San Jose State, they have the synchronous portion of the classes. So they either have to attend some live Zoom classes or some kind of a breakout groups. Not all. So the uh, opportunity to have that interaction is going to be critical. So does it have to be facilitated by the teacher? I think that's another story. But are there opportunities to talk to other people? It could be a breakout group. 4 or 5 people get together and do the questions together. If that's there, I think the level of experience, the satisfaction will be much better than just one-way YouTube style in, instruction with multiple choice boxes being ticked off for grading. Does that answer your question? Mhm.
Any other questions? One more. All right, let me get the mic to you.
Thank you for this. I sat in a involuntary study on this topic years ago
Okay.
and experienced a lot of students being really frustrated that this was being conducted, this kind of research was being conducted unknowingly.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that you're bringing it into the classroom, and it's part of the facilitating of the course.
Mhm.
Have you found different receptivity levels based on the types of questions you're asking, whether they're more social connection based questions or it's questions related to the curriculum, and providing answers to specific questions that
Yes.
are part of the material presented?
Yes. Fantastic. So it's both. So for the beginning of the class, I just make it really easy to answer. There's no wrong answer for the questions that were presented here. So that provides an opportunity to just speak. Students want to share their stories and their backgrounds. So that primes them for that behavior and encourages that behavior. And through these mechanisms, it is reinforced. Now, during the teaching section, there are a lot of content-related questions. So those content-related questions, during those content-related questions, the behaviors tend to continue. Oh, I already opened my mouth. I already shared my story. So it becomes much easier for them to actually raise their hand and share their story, share their answers to that. This is for more of a content-related right or wrong questions. That behavior continues throughout when there is this modality of interacting socially with each other and sometimes even speaking up on those questions at the beginning of class. Does that answer your question? Yes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's the time we have for you. So thank you, Damon.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. We've been working together over the last month or so, and I really appreciate how empathetic and involved our faculty here are. So we will go to, hi, Abe, Dr. Abe Wolcott. Sorry, we're adjusting here. For the live stream audience, Abe is going to, Dr. Abraham Wolcott will share his screen. So you will lose the video, but you'll be seeing his screen as well. Or you will be seeing his screen instead. So now we have Dr. Abraham Wolcott. His presentation is using virtual reality and physical chemistry to increase STEM efficacy and STEM identity. All right.
Thank you. Lauren, can we get my slides projected up there? I'm sorry? I already did. There we go. Hey, lovely. Hey, the technology's working. For today's talk, it's kind of motivated by issues that we have. Let me just get this guy out of here. Usually I'm loud enough. The talk is mainly motivated around student outcomes and learning in a course which is quite tricky. So you're a chemist, but now you're going to do physical chemistry, which you kind of got 3 years ago in general chemistry with lots of mathematics, models which describe physical phenomenon, and then you're supposed to encompass not only the qualitative but quantitative information. And then all of a sudden you need to be assessed on this and do it quickly. So when I first got into this, I was taking a piece of foam and then I was throwing it against a wall to describe kinetic molecular theory. Is there something that I should be doing? Am I screwing up? Can you hold on to this guy for a sec? That's kind of our first gen headsets. Your VR basically starts with using a cell phone. So that's kind of the beginning guy, and you can put your regular Android or iPhone in there. And we've kind of graduated a little bit and moved into different technology. Maybe some of you are aware of Meta and the metaverse and this type of thing. So this is a more updated version of the software, but you have to start somewhere. And so I can pass these around, but in general, we're going to see this progression throughout the talk. But when it comes down to student success, what we're really dealing with, and I can see Lauren, it's not changing up here, but it is on my slide. So we have some sort of delay. Oh, are you doing all the slide changes? Oh, very good. So in this particular case, we need to discuss DFW rates. So students who get D, F, and withdrawals, and which is relatively high in both general chemistry, which affects massive numbers of students, and physical chemistry. Later on in their career, this has been used in Gen Chem as well as Chem 160 and 161A. I'll get into course methodology, connecting theoretical models, some of our envision goals. You'll be able to see the VR environment and get into some of these conclusions. Now, at this stage, so should I request a slide change? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Okay, so when thinking about human factors, we're talking about the interaction of humans with technology. There's no better way to get right down to the heart of it than the connectome. The connectome is the study of the interconnections between neurons from a single neuron to a functioning human being. You guys can check out this particular paper. It came out in 2014. The Brain Activity Map project was started in the Obama administration. There's an interesting quote within the Brain Activity Map project summary, and it says, new directions in science are launched by new tools much more often than by new concepts. The effect of a concept-driven revolution is to explain old things in new ways. The effect of a tool-driven revolution is to discover things that have to be explained. You don't know how the brain really works because you don't have the tools in order to dive in. In virtual reality, embedding information within one's brain because you're using proprioception, you're actually experiencing it, may be kind of a revolutionary way that we learn. And I'll let you judge whether or not Freeman Dyson is the right person to judge that. And the question that we have is, can we go ahead and make substantive changes in the DFW rates at San Jose State, throughout the Cal State, into the UC, and across the United States and other nations? So I want you to pay attention to Chem 161A, 130B, and 1A. Some of these are general chemistry, so we're talking about massive numbers of students, all the way up into the classes taken right before graduation. The main issue, of course, is these high DFW rates. So almost 25% or more students are going to fail this course and not be able to advance, not be able to graduate. And this is going to lead to recidivism, maybe a switching in the major that they have. They could switch out of a STEM major, and all of the other cascades of negative things that could occur in a student's career goals and aspirations. So these things really need some rethinking. And ultimately, it's important that we keep an open mind. In this particular case, we're looking at 4-year graduation rates, and this is broken down by female, male, URM, non-URM, first gen, and not first gen. And you'll notice that we've got a longer length for lower 4th-year graduation rates for first gen students, the guys, as well as URM students. And the idea is the version of equity is for all students to be able to achieve at the same time. with little to no hindrance. So let's get into one path with human factors that we can potentially do that. Here's a little historical journey, what happened to me at SJSU using some seed funding, everywhere from $1,000 to 15,000, getting VR headsets that we have right here. Can you hold up that VR headset? There it is. They no longer sell this. That guy is $30. The one over here is the Quest is about 300. So the difference is tenfold. But what I did is I took that cheap headset, I had my students download a free app, and I merged it into my class. So I got VR into the hands of my students for $30. Everybody has a cell phone, everyone. And I've had hundreds of students, and not a single student didn't have a cell phone. Anyway, so we parlayed this work and a combination of getting additional funding, and now we've got funding from the National Science Foundation, Hispanic Serving Institutions, and we've got $1 million across 3 campuses. This includes Fresno State, Sonoma State, and here at San Jose State. So the idea, of course, is what kind of methodologies do you use in the classroom? What is your pedagogy? And in PChem, I typically use a combination of cooperative learning, so process-oriented guided learning exercises, oral presentations, use constructionism, learning by making, by doing things, argumentation, logically reasoning to understand how phenomenon is happening, to verify why something is quantitatively or qualitatively valid. And then the new scale is our sensory immersion, using these headsets, fully being in the environment where the microscopic is now real. And of course, in order for the students to be able to learn these things, they create graphs, they talk about it, they make Khan Academy style videos, and they move forward. And the idea, and I'm not sure if this is going to come through. Lauren, is this going to work for me? This would be really fancy if this worked. I'd feel super good about this. Okay, I'm going to hit the button. Damn it. Can you hit the button on your end? So this is a movie of us inside of ChemVR. So hopefully it'll begin to work. It definitely works with. No, it's a full video. It's a full video. But the idea is that you can readily be inside of this microscopic environment where you've got a heads-up display, where you're able to readily change the aspects of these molecules inside of this environment. And the idea is to do almost everything within the VR environment, including having a lecture in case students wish to reimagine or to go over this particular subject matter again. You can also be assessed, but you are involved. You are changing sliders and making things happen in real time. Don't worry, for those who are really interested, I can hand you a headset later on, and you can do the app yourself. I did this at ACS in Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago, and everybody loved it. But these molecules are moving around. The container in which they are living can be completely changed. And the idea is to be able to get synaptic feedback from the user instantaneously. This is temperature, it's gas identity, it's the size of the container, and being able to get microscopic information and connecting it to macroscopic pressure. Unfortunately, there's got to be issues with technology. I'm just glad that the mic is working. So what did the students think about this? We've been doing this since 2018. This took about a year and a half of development, and this is a little bit of feedback. Many students use the HTC Vive, which is a cousin of the Meta headset. Some of them used the cell phone version. Most of the time, the students who used the higher end Ferrari version had a much better learning experience. Smoother, easier to use, and it just gave more information to the user. Overall, how easy or difficult was it to use the controller to complete the lab experiments and quiz? So selecting variables and changing their values. you'll notice that we have a pretty good spread. Ultimately, we want folks to have a very simple human factors experience. The technology should speak to them. So we have work to do over here because we should have the majority of our students saying it's very, very easy to interface with the technology. So that's something we need to work on. Next question, how easy or difficult was it to know where you should be or what you should be doing at any given time? Basically, the flow of events inside of the VR environment. I think in this case, we did a fairly horrible job because 11 out of maybe 30 students didn't know where to go. This is not good. We need to work on this. And if your technology is not amiable to easy use, people are going to reject it. They're going to put down the headset. They're going to have a horrible time and they're going to say, why did you make me do this? And this is worth points. It's not good. So the last question would be, can VR as an effective learning experience? I like this number. We should get this close to 100. You know, where they say it's awesome. It's like we're getting technology in our hands. It's cutting edge. It increases STEM identity and STEM efficacy. Like I'm using cutting edge technology in my chemistry courses, in my STEM courses, and I feel good about it. We need to increase that number, but we're starting off at a pretty good state. So now to the criticism. You would have seen it if we had the video, but I love this first one. And this is them like writing in their own anonymous comments. It is meaningless watching a video in the VR. Thank you. I appreciate that. Tell us how you really feel. So they don't want to be in a VR environment and be watching a video. That's fair enough. Like they don't want to see a Khan Academy style video inside of VR. And it shouldn't be 22 minutes. We put a 22-minute video in there. That was a bad idea. Maybe 5 minutes would be more appropriate. What else was said? The difference between the Vive and the other VR headset is so tremendous, though I don't think there's any way to achieve that level without giving students a very expensive device. But the dean of the library just invested $150,000 in new technology, and folks can go to the Clever Lab and use the high-dollar headsets, and we can get hundreds of students through a VR experience during a given semester. So don't think scalability can't happen. In another comment, it says, sometimes it was hard to read the pop-up menu, bottom quarters of the screen. I liked the sound it made when we adjusted the parameters. It should have given me confirmation that my quiz had been submitted. So again, human factors, making it easy. And this comment I really like. This could definitely replace a lecture. So that kind of tells you that there's something going on there when students are saying, well, we could cover more content or do things different because this is just as effective as us being inside of the classroom. So I really like that comment. In physical chemistry, in chemistry, we've got processes that happen physically. We've got models that describe these processes, but some of them are so abstract, you need a visual representation. And in thermodynamics and in PChem, we use things like the internal combustion engine and piston work. But actually visualizing entropy. Does anybody know what entropy is? It's the reason your car breaks down. It's disorder over time. But when you're introduced to entropy in PChem, it sounds like gobbledygook. And you have to quantify it. So you need to understand it qualitatively and quantitatively to actually get a firm understanding of what entropy is. So we want to keep advancing this work in chemistry, in physics. If there's any biologists out there or people in engineering, it's also been used in engineering as well. We wish to make these advancements. Rest in peace. Grumpy Cat, he says PChem is hard and involves a lot of math. He's perfectly happy with that when he used to grace the internet. Thank you, Grumpy Cat. So if we were in the environment, you would see something like this. So we've got our reaction cube, we've got our heads-up display where students are readily changing temperature, gas identity, and these types of things. What we need is something easy to use. It has to be fiscally sound. We should be able to put the technology into everybody's hands. There shouldn't be any of those barriers. The Quest, Bobo VR, that's basically a series of add-ons that you can put onto the headsets. Those are about $99, but the headsets that she was holding onto that hold your cell phone, that's only a $30 headset. And so that really lowers the barrier. any of these VR experiences should be physically accurate. They should represent reality. It should not be fake. What's nice about Unity, the environment in which we coded this, there's already physics-related programming modules inside there. So when you build it, it's already got classical physics represented. So that's quite nice. And of course, why is that there? Because they want zombie killing video games to accurately depict real physics. And that's where Unity is from. It's basically a VR environment used for making video games, but why not use it for education? Of course, we want to continue to expand it and leverage into new areas. So if you're interested in this, if this seems enticing to you, reach out to me. I'm incredibly busy. I'm already tired. I think my 3 kids would understand how tired they're making me, but I still want to keep pushing this along. So reach out to me, and we're going to make continued progress, through the years. And as long as we keep doing good, impactful work, we'll figure out ways of getting money and keeping the funding going. I'm very confident of that. So this is some of our new work. We're doing degrees of freedom, so the motion of molecules in X, Y, and Z. This is how we do things. We do it piecemeal. We get the programming dollars, and we continue to build up the efficacy of these modules. And of course, the main thing is keeping the students engaged. All of these sliders are amazing. And when you put on the headset, you can do it just by waving your hands. You can change the gas identity, the temperature of the system, all of these things instantaneously. And there's something to be said about the encoding of information when you're doing it. It's like, if you wanted to learn to play basketball, would you read a book about playing ball? No. You get out onto the court, and you play the game. It's the same thing here. You need to do this in order to become a master, to become good. And I think there's a lot of areas for us to expand doing this work. So, our conclusions, we've got visualization and immersion that reinforces our models. It's physically accurate. Development is slow, and that's a problem. We need to leverage into our new areas and build our faculty learning community. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here. I want to build the faculty learning community and have you all come be interested and join our cohorts. We're currently recruiting for cohort C. This is our Alice XR team. Wei and Vivian are over at Fresno State. We've got Dr. Gomez, who's over there at STEMnet, myself, Sarah, Dr. Wade, and Dylan across 3 different campuses. We want your help. We want you to be involved. And this is the VR team here at SJSU. Nancy is a human factors expert. John Oakes used to be in industry and is now the director of the Clever Lab and is also doing a lot of machine learning and AI in the library. And then Patrick Stafford is the Dark Lord of Unity coding. And I thank you very much for your time, and I'll take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Dr. Wolcott? You can always count on Richard.
Thanks, Abe. I appreciate
sure.
it. I'm curious how much you've engaged with. So what strikes me that you're doing that's unique and really different is you're taking sort of the modeling experience to a non-one-to-one ratio, right? So we have, flight simulators and we have driving simulators on this campus, right? We have these kinds of programs, and there's research about the effectiveness of that, how to use those, et cetera. I'm curious how much that research is informing this, because you're really you're giving people tools to something you couldn't do in reality, right? Because they're so small. But I'm just curious if that's influencing, if you're talking to those professors, if you're working with the aviation people at all.
No. No, I never talked to those people once. Maybe I should. But the idea, though, is that you can physically get behind a car. You can physically fly an airplane. You cannot transport yourself to the size of an atom and be able to see this microscopic environment. That's a big, big leap. So to find something on the microscopic level, we are miniaturizing you down to the pico length scale, 10 to the minus 12 meters. This is not applicable in the way that you would do a simulation. So we need to think outside of the box. We need to be creative, but more than anything, we need to be able to see the microscopic world in real time and allow the learner, allow the individual who is understanding this information to manipulate it. You're not a voyeur. You are a participant in the physics. You are a participant in the environment, and that's essential. And that's what makes students and myself like geek out on this whole thing, and that's what makes it cool, because you're no longer just doing something. Like, I can drive a car and I could be in a simulator for a car like a video game, but it's not like this. You're actually being transported into another space. And so I should probably reach out to those people to find out what they've learned. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it keeps safety up, of course, whether or not it's driving a car or it's getting behind, aircraft. In this particular case, I really like the idea of leveraging past knowledge about how you can embed information into people's brains to make them more comfortable. But at the same time, I think at this stage, it's interesting when you can have a heads-up display which readily gives you feedback. And I think a tactile feedback would actually be kind of cool, and use tactile gloves as you're changing it so that you can truly feel it. And everybody in the room has been exposed to proprioception. Proprioception is your perception of your reality, allowing me to know that I'm standing vertically on the surface of Earth. But this is kind of embedded in our brains. We've evolved with this information. And now to be able to put it into the hands of chemists, biologists, physicists, engineers, artists, can be quite powerful. So I think we're just at the beginning, and there's a lot of interesting places that we can go. And so um, sky's the limit. Space is the limit. Cosmos is the limit.
Wonderful. All right, well, let's hear it again for Dr. Wolcott. Thank you. I don't think there's anything you don't do. I can't keep up with you and all your work.
Yeah, my wife's upset.
Well, thank you again. All right, and next, our last presenter before our lunch break, we have Supreet Kaur, who is presenting on meaningful human technology interactions for a better tomorrow. Supreet, welcome.
Let's see, where is the clicker? So, thank you. So, full disclaimer, I do not work in human factors. I am an alumna of San Jose State University and fell into this work in some ways. I'm currently the lead systems engineer for Data and Reasoning Fabric. By reasoning, we mean AI, machine learning enabled algorithms, which help you make sense of large sets of data. So I want to start off with this photo, which you will see hanging around NASA Ames as you're walking around. And it is one of my favorite artworks because of how badly I interpreted it when I first saw it. So to me, the yellow circle is the human operators or the decision makers who are making critical decisions using various sources of dynamic data. And the blue bubble is, you can see the impacted aircrafts, you can see satellites, that face outline, I imagined that was AI. Um, you have the air traffic control tower over there, kind of in the middle between the two bubbles. And I thought, okay, well, that's the setting that these two entities interact in. There's a lot going on here, and it's open to interpretation. But this is what airspace operations is like. It is a large dynamic systems of system with very little room for error because quite literally human lives and cargo is at stake. But we'll come back to this photo. So as I was saying, I am not from a human factors background, And I absolutely do not have an aviation background either. I graduated from SJSU with a bachelor's in industrial and systems engineering. So, how did I end up here? Well, I found myself between my third and fourth year of my bachelor's without any work experience. And I was, I had several classes with Dr. Dan Roberts, whom you guys may know. And I said, I need to get some experience. I don't know what to do. And he referred me to the Human Factors Engineering Lab over in the engineering building. And I got to work with a grad student named Janet Chastain, who was who had a research topic of healthcare handoff amongst lay caregivers. This was my first exposure to human in the loop simulations, which is essentially having people play a role within a scenario to see how people would behave if presented with an ambiguity and various tasks that they have no idea how to perform. And I found that to be an incredibly rewarding experience. It was volunteer work, but it taught me a lot about human factors as well as systems engineering. And that is what landed me my first internship at NASA, in which I ended up working very closely with the human factors team on a project called Airspace Technology Demonstration 2, which was an effort to provide solutions to several problems within a complicated multi airport space. So there I am, testing the systems. On the left side, I am a pseudo pilot. Keep in mind, I've never flown anything prior to this experience. So I'm putting myself in the shoes of a pilot going, okay, if I were presented with this problem, how would I act? What makes sense? Does the graphic user interface look right? Is it optimizing my operations? Is it slowing me down? Does this actually work? And on the right hand side, I'm playing the role of a pseudo air traffic controller and just having the time of my life, to be honest. Um, because I didn't have an aviation background, I would often find myself asking a lot of questions as to what would typically happen if the pilot was presented with this anomaly or that. And so I got a pretty heavy crash course in airspace operations while I was doing that internship. So we created a system which we thought would be helpful to air traffic controllers, pilots, airlines, airport management, and so forth. But the next step was figuring out if this was actually usable and optimized operations. So that's why I call it the moment of truth. So we use historical data to simulate traffic. Let's say we had a rough day on January 15, 2009. We took that data, put it into the simulation. This facility at NASA is called Future Flight Central, and it's essentially a 360-degree view that you would have from the ATC tower. And so it's meant to mimic what happened that day. And you have actual pilots coming in, playing around with the system, as well as current and retired air traffic controllers and people from the FAA and the airline management and other stakeholders, the folks who run the day to day operations. They actually came in to play with the system we designed. And you can't see me here, but I would be hiding in a corner like a little shadow, observing people and taking notes as to how they use the system. And what I learned is there is a beauty in being completely out of your depth and oblivious to the way things work. There's a systems engineering principle in which we say, ask why 5 times to get to the root cause of a problem. And so I'm there, a little intern, and I'm watching these pilots make these decisions, and I'm just going, why are you doing that? Okay, but why would you park the airplane like that? And I kept asking these questions, and that's how I realized that there is a big gap between the people who design the technology meant to be used and the people actually using the technology. And as much as we try to walk a mile in somebody's shoes, we'll never have the full experience they will. So, for example, when we were having the air traffic controllers use the system, I noticed they would park planes bumper to bumper. Well, it's not a bumper, but nose to tail. And who has never flown a plane prior to that, would have never done that. I would want as much space between two aircrafts as possible, but that's what they did to make sure that the runway was empty and other flights could take off and land at the appropriate time. And then I also learned that there were features which we designed in this system which the folks using could have cared less about, honestly. They were like, yeah, this, I'm not going to touch it. I don't care about this. So, my biggest takeaway from that entire experience and the brush I had with human factors is something that I currently utilize in my day to day practices, which is it's critical to have the involvement of your stakeholders throughout the development cycle, not just do one iteration, check in with them at the end, or develop the product based on what you think they want and then have them test drive it at the end. No, connect with them, make sure it's something that they actually need, something they will actually feel comfortable using. So, I want to give you guys an example, which is more industry based than the work we do at NASA. We all, I'm assuming, we all have a smartphone in this room. How many of the apps on your phone do you actually use? Okay. That's because this phone is designed for communication, connectivity, entertainment, and the target audience is broad. The goal is to make money, right? That's what drives this product. The work we do at NASA, it's about either optimizing the operations we have right now or implementing operations. And we are driven by totally different values. I mean, we're driven by the desire to do societal good and sustainability. We have very specific end users in mind who are serving a larger population, and we absolutely cannot compromise on safety. Those are the lessons, those differentiating between the stakeholders, and those lessons are what I've been carrying into my current project, which is DRF, Data and Reasoning Fabric, where we're trying to enable the integration of the airspace operations today, so with all of your flights going in and out of San Jose, and then adding new age aircrafts like drones for deliveries or air taxis into that mix and sonic airplanes. And we're trying to design it in a way where we can optimize future workflows. We're talking to drone operators to see how they would see themselves within that system as we integrate vertically up. We're talking to dispatchers. What kind of information do you need? Talking to airline pilots. Okay, when you're looking at the weather, how are you making the decisions you're making? So that, in short, was my brush with human factors, which has had a lifelong impact on me. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Supreet. Do we have any questions in the audience? Always.
First, thank you for coming. I really do appreciate it. It strikes me, and I'm curious. You mentioned, you know, you talk to the users and they say, "I'm never going to use that," right? But your goal, unlike, so thinking about the pandemic, right, and the logistics challenges we had with supply chains, and we've talked about some of the logistical problems have external causes, but some have the fact that we have extremely efficient systems, but they're brittle, right? So if you disrupt them, they break. Because we've designed them to be incredibly efficient. In some ways, it sounds like you all are creating ways that maybe they're not so brittle, right? They're more robust. They might not need those parts of the system, but do they allow for redundancies and backups? And I'm curious, when you're thinking about a user-centered design, is there still that desire to have sort of backup, for lack of a better word? Is that, and maybe I'm misthinking of it. I am a humanities scholar, so
No, this is a great question. So you remember how I said we can't compromise on safety? You have to have redundancies. I mean, I'm not working on any spacecrafts at the moment, but within a spacecraft, there's at least 3-4 layers of redundancies minimum. When we're talking about planes and drone taxis, yes, absolutely. And with this system, I'll give you the example of DRF, and you guys can read up on it. I think it's nasa.drf.gov. So we have this digital ecosystem, and you can think of it similar to a navigation app on your phone. Now, when you're using the navigation app, it has so many sources of data. It's got weather, it's got the layout of the streets, it's got the zones that are blocked off due to construction, whatnot, right? And you put in where you want to go from point A to point B, and it gives you a trajectory, and you go. Now, if the data for the streets, the way the streets are laid out, is gone, what do? Your navigation system stops working. But you have the luxury of being at, ground level and getting out of your car, pulling out a paper map. You don't have that while you're flying. So what we have is we have substitutable services and data sources. So yeah, I might get my weather services and information from one source, but we have the ability to seamlessly substitute in case that goes down and continue doing that to make sure that anybody who's using the system has continuous access to the information they need and their trajectory is current and up to date.
Do we have any other questions? Supreet? No. Well, let's have another round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do in keeping our airspace safe.
Okay. So now are going to take a 30. Lauren, are we still doing 30 minutes, or are we ending at a certain 25-minute lunch break? So we will reconvene at 12:30. So please use this time to stretch, grab some sandwiches in the back, and for our virtual audience, we will reconvene at 12:30. Thank you. All right, everyone. Well, welcome back where we are now resuming our presentations. We have a few more exciting presentations here for you all to listen to. Our next presenter will be Mojtaba Sharifi. His presentation is titled Safe and Stable Human-Robot Interaction for Assistance and Rehabilitation.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mojtaba Sharifi. I'm an assistant professor at Mechanical Engineering Department here in CSU. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about our research project on safe and stable human-robot interaction for assistance and rehabilitation. So to give you a little bit of background on this research, it's important to know why human-robot interaction is important in assistive and collaborative robotics. And that's because of having human as a very important part of these systems, as you can see in these videos, and the concerns that we have regarding the human safety and comfort when they are collaborating with robotic systems. And as you can see, the human is recipient of the physical assistant, or the person is doing a kind of collaborative task together with the robots. So as these robotic systems become more autonomous, we have more concerns about the human safety. So there is a kind of trade-off between robot autonomy and human safety, and that's a challenge that we have tried to resolve. And we have different point of view regarding control and autonomy, and also regarding design and fabrication. At the same time, we want to have a kind of acceptable task performance in different tasks. So that's the kind of research challenge that we want to resolve. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So in the area of robot autonomy, I have 3 active projects right now. So the first one is on intelligent control of lower limb exoskeletons. I'm going to play that video. Okay, the top one here. And in this project, we have high-level control to do path planning with flexible torque control. At low level, we are trying to estimate the human effort at each joint and identify the intention of the person. As a result, we can personalize the trajectory of walking for each person, and we can provide also postural stability autonomously for that person. The second project is on machine learning. We use reinforcement learning to control upper limb exoskeletons, as you can see here. Again, we are looking at the muscle effort by EMG electromyographic sensors on the skin of the person, and we can get to know about the muscle activity. And based on that, we can deliver enough assistance to do such a task like this is weight handling task here. So that's the other project. And the third one is on integrating auditory data. Basically, in this video, you can see that I'm talking to exoskeleton to stand up, to speed up, to sit down. And this is better and faster and safer rather than working with a kind of mobile app to command that exoskeleton. And we are going to get this exoskeleton soon as a part of NSF award later. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, regarding the design and fabrication, I have a couple of projects at SCSU. So as you can see, we have developed light, high torque and cost-effective exoskeletons for hip, for knee, for shoulder and elbow, and also for ankle here. We also develop a kind of sensorized insole to get to know what is the distribution of the force when the person is walking here. So we try to have soft, rigid combinations to make it comfortable for the person. Again, make it safer. We want to make it adjustable, portable, again, to make it comfortable for each user. So the second project that I have is on autonomous assistive walker, so which the general idea is here. So regarding the structure, we optimize the structure to have maximum postural stability. Basically, the structure is enough stable to hold the person's weight with maximum stability. Also, regarding the sensors and motors, we have LiDAR sensor here, which is a kind of laser sensor that can look at 360 degrees around and get to know about the obstacles. we do have a force sensor, which is 6-axis, and it's pretty expensive. So with this sensor, we can get to know about the force input of the user. So in 3-axis X, Y, Z, and also torque, if the person is falling down, forward, backward. So we can get to know about that. And based on this sensor information, we can do autonomous path planning in any environment. And we also use a new type of DC motors here, which is very compact, but is very high torque. So that's the other project. But let's wrap up that. Regarding the control and autonomy, we try to use machine learning algorithms and intelligent controllers. So that's to enhance the autonomy of robotic systems. At the same time, we want to preserve the safety and stability of the person. So we try to consider that in our control design and to make a kind of balance between autonomy and safety. As you can see, this is pretty comfortable, but the exo is trying to learn. So after each trial, that assistance is better and better. And as I said, regarding the design and development, we want to make the structure of each system to be comfortable, as I said, lightweight, stable, and high torque. And for future studies, we want to, like regarding the theoretical contribution, we want to make the system more stable. Basically, when we have machine learning, it's a kind of computational tool. So sometimes we cannot guarantee the stability. So that's a kind of technical challenge that we have to make sure that the system is enough stable when we are, for example, implementing reinforcement learning, which we are doing here. So, for example, in this project, we put some limits on the range of exploring for the agent of learning, such that the robot wouldn't do a crazy task, like crazy behavior, and that can damage the person. So, and for the future work, again, it's good to combine vocal, visual, and mechanical data together, like human-human interaction. So that's the idea for the future, and also in the area of machine learning. So to have that kind of interaction, which is also helpful for our system. So basically, for example, the person can talk to exoskeleton, or for lower limb. At the same time, we can do image processing with the camera. So if we can combine all of them, that would be a better interaction between human and robots. And again, in the future, we are looking to commercialize some of these products. So we want to make it low cost, light, to be useful for home-based and long-term usage. And that's it. So here is my students in College of Engineering Showcase, and they got the award of the most engaging project earlier this month. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Thank you. Does anyone have a question for Dr. Sharifi?
Thank you for your work. It's fascinating stuff. I'm curious if you can maybe expand a little bit more on the machine learning algorithms and are those, so I'm assuming, well, I won't make assumption. I'll just say expand a little bit more on the machine learning algorithms
Yeah.
for us.
So yeah, machine learning would be a challenge here because, oh, that's another presentation here. Okay, but I can explain that. Okay, but the issue is that most of machine learning algorithms would work offline, basically when you have like, big data. But for robotics, the challenge is we want to do real-time machine learning, which the most useful one or famous one is reinforcement learning. But reinforcement learning has an agent, and that agent can explore like in a range of input and outputs, and that's another challenge because basically when the exo or robot is connected to the body, we cannot do any very like large movement or applying a large torque. So that's a challenge that we have. So we aim to use reinforcement learning, but we try to put a cost function to make it optimum. At the same time, put some limits on the movement, on the torque. So that's the current state of the art right now. Yeah, but that's for long future. Right now, even if you want to implement intelligent controller, it doesn't have machine learning, but it has some sort of flexibility. Then for safety approvals, we have some issues. So I think that would be for long term. But for research, yeah, you're doing that to get to know how we can implement that. Yeah.
Well, I was watching the arm moving back and forth with the basket. It made me wonder, could this be a future tool for physical therapy? Because you could set a range of movement and keep that person's limb moving
Yeah.
50 times or whatever it needs to be to
Yeah, that's the
regain
next
that.
step of our project. So we are going to do some physical therapy tasks with collaboration with physical therapists and occupational therapists here at SASU, and also with other university, UCSF, and the other institutions. Yeah, that's right.
Other question?
Do you see potential in other applications, for example, like sports, where you can jump higher or make you stronger? Not for the elderly, but for general public?
Yeah, that's a good question. So these exoskeletons have been used for able-bodied people, but when they want to do heavy tasks, like they want to do a kind of heavy manual task. But for sports, I think they should be very, very, like light and flexible. And most of the assistive devices there are passive. They are not active. But because when you add actuator, you would make it heavy. Okay. Even in industry, most of the exoskeletons are passive. So they would adjust it in a specific position and specific stiffness to help the person, but they are not, they don't have any actuator on the structure. But I don't know about the future. If we can design very small actuators, which I use a kind of specific actuator just for that purpose. We got it from a startup company in China, because even though it's a small, it can apply 100 Newton meter torque. But probably in the future, yeah, if we can have active exoskeletons that are light enough, probably yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for your presentation. It's amazing stuff. All right. And next up, we have Nada Attar. Dr. Attar is going to be presenting on understanding the bias of human about gender role, a novel eye tracking study.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so I'm from the computer science department at College of Science. So there is a lack of human-computer interaction studies focusing on training the users to be unbiased toward gender, specifically toward women. I can see. So I'm just gonna... Okay. And that when it includes interfaces such as arts. And what we did in this study, we wanted to test if we can untrain the gender bias or ethnocentric bias by using art as stimulus without the need for explicit coaching. So as you see, we collected paintings from the 19th centuries, and those paintings, they were by European artists. And we categorized them into three classes. So the first one, as you see an example here, of a lady who's reading. So we label this as a female intellectual. And the one in the middle is also a man who's holding a book, and that's also a male intellectual. But the last one here, it's a slave who's a female in a slavery market. So that's what we call it, a female only. So any image that a woman or a man is doing any intellectual activity, such as reading or playing an instrument or singing, we call it an intellectual activity. But if the person is just posing, doing nothing, we just call it female only. Now, we didn't have a male only because most of the paintings at that time were doing the male as an intellectual, but there is no male only. There were very, very few, but they were not enough for a study. And we collected these images and we labeled them. And just to verify what we're doing, we started to study the history behind these paintings. And we found that none of those artists actually visited Middle East or visited Asia. So that was all an imaginary. So why did they do that? And why did they, portray this part of group of people as maybe unintellectual or, as like, oppressed females? And part of that probably because of the colonization at that era. But we were thinking, how can we take something that make women or make a race being objectified and use it to untrain the bias if we use HCI? So we took all the paintings and we cropped part of the scene. And then we gave two options, two characters, and we asked the user to choose one of these two characters, and we told them that none of these actually part of the real paintings. So there is no correct or incorrect answer. You just need to choose one that you think it could fit this painting. So we had 334 participants from 4 English-speaking countries. We have US, we have Canada, and Australia, and what else? UK, yeah. And we use Amazon Mechanical Turk. So it was an online study. And then we replicated the study in the lab, and we used Tobii Pro Fusion because we want to see what they're doing and how their eyes interact with the stimulus. So we had 16 participants, 8 of them were females. And this is how the untraining happened. So we had 30 trials, and there is a 15 seconds for each trial. The first 10 trials, we call it block 1, and the last 10 trials, we call it block 3, and those are exactly the same. So we give them all options of categories, and we ask them to choose between 2 categories. But then in the middle block, we only show them 2 options of female intellectual. So they don't have an option not to choose a female who's not doing an intellectual activity. And we did that for 10 trials. And then after that, we give them again all the options. I want to see if there is a training here that happened to the user. And guess what? We found that after the training block, that users start to choose more female intellectual in the third block. Not only that, but we also found an increase in the pupil size when we tried it with the eye tracker. And that pupil size could be related to more cognitive load, more thinking, more processing. So they were like thinking more in the third block comparing to the first block. Also, we found that the response time when they choose a female intellectual is more than when they choose female only or male intellectual. And we found that the 20% drop of the female only. So they were more likely to choose more female character who are doing intellectual activity. So with this, we realized that there is a possibility to untrain the bias and to do it, implicitly without, explicit coaching if we use an interface design for it. And we can also move from the training that we have for diversity and inclusion from this just a view button or checkbox to more, implicit way to make, the people and like workers in companies that they train more to be more, not biased against gender. This is one of the studies that we had in our lab. And my talk is actually end here. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Attar. Do we have any questions for Dr. Attar? Yes.
Yes.
Thanks for that talk. It was super interesting.
you.
And I may have missed it, and I know you only have 5 minutes to say it, but was there sort of a control where instead of having a training block, it was still mixed? So you could sort of see whether there's potentially an order effect or whether it's definitely because of the training block. I may have missed it.
So
in block 2, were there 2 different arms of that?
So the middle block has only the female intellectual as 2 options. But the first one and the third one, they're completely random.
Right. Yeah. And I was just wondering whether there was a second stream in which you have block 1 and 3 are the same as that, but block 2 is still mixed. So you can sort of really pull out the effect of that intervention versus maybe an effect of doing it 3 times.
Exactly.
No, like an order effect.
Yeah, I
maybe?
understand that.
Yeah.
So we were thinking to add another experiment where the middle block is completely random. But we were like, but the first one, we could compare it with the third one, and it's going to be the same. You know, if you add like another experiment without any training, it's same effect as just measuring the first block.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any?
Along the same lines, I'm curious if you've thought about sort of follow-up studies to see if if the effects dissipate over time. Also thinking through sort of priming effects and the priming studies and sort of media studies where it does tend to dissipate unless you retrain and retrain. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. We actually had another experiment, but because we're still running, so we're not done with all the analysis, but we had another experiment like that. But instead of showing 2 female intellectual, we were showing male intellectual. And then we compare if, seeing male intellectual would improve choosing female intellectual. So far, we've seen some increase, but it's not as obvious as the 2 options of the female intellectual. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Attar. Very good.
It's kind of difficult to get. I know. There we go. Perfect. All right. Well, our final presentation for the day is Cassie Hilditch. Her presentation is entitled, "Is Sleepy Supervision the New Drowsy Driving?" Going backwards. Stand by. All right, I might attempt to be mobile also. Thanks. Awesome. Great. So thanks for sticking with us today till the end of the session. So my name's Cassie Hilditch. I'm employed through San Jose State University Research Foundation, but based at the Fatigue Countermeasures Lab at NASA Ames Research Center. So I think this is my second time on campus in about the 5 years that I've worked here. But I managed to find the place, so that was good. So I'm going to start off with a show of hands from this huge audience that we have here in person. You can play along at home as well. So who here had 6 hours or less sleep last night? Oh, okay, yep. And who here drove here today? Oh no, the same hands. Okay, so we may be sort of over-representative of the 1/3 of Americans who typically get 6 or less hours sleep per night. And this is well below the recommended level of 7 to 9 hours sleep per night. So what it means is that we have this epidemic of chronic sleep loss within our population. So it's probably no surprise then that we have about 20% of our motor vehicle accidents are due to drowsy driving or falling asleep behind the wheel. And we do have some increased automation features within vehicles that can help offset
these incidents, so automatic braking, line detection, things like that. But as we're moving towards more autonomy in these vehicles, we're actually changing the role of the driver from sort of being manually actively engaged to passively monitoring the vehicle. And passive monitoring requires vigilant attention. And unfortunately, vigilant attention is very sensitive to sleep loss. And so you can see sort of where this might be going. And you've probably all seen news articles about people falling asleep in their Teslas. So we wanted to see whether there was a difference in sleepiness of people engaged in actively driving a car versus monitoring a self-driving vehicle. So to do that, we had our participants wear an ActiWatch, which was measuring their sleep for 2 weeks before they came into the lab. So it's basically like a research-grade Fitbit. And then when they came into the lab, we had them do 2 simulated driving tasks, one where they were actively manually driving the car, and the other one was a self-driving vehicle or autonomous condition, and they just had to keep their hands on the wheel. Both these drives were about 45 minutes in length, sort of a rural highway setting. And as you can see here, we had them all wired up, so we were measuring their brain activity and their eye movements during this drive. And from that, we can measure the drowsiness state of the brain, and we can also measure transitions from wake into sleep. We also asked participants to rate how sleepy they felt, and we gave them a reaction time task, which is a measure of that vigilant attention component. So what did we find? So in the top left here, I think I may be too close for that. Anyway, top left. Oh, glad I didn't blind myself, I guess, yeah. Okay, so top left here, I mentioned that I had less than 6 hours sleep previously, so this top left here is showing the number of slow rolling eye movements, and this is a marker of transitioning from wake into sleep. So you can see in this self-driving car condition that our participants had more of these transitions from wake into sleep during that drive. And in the graph below here in the survival plot, you can see that in that self-driving condition, they actually went into those transitions sooner into the drive. So at about 15 minutes into the drive, pretty much everyone had had at least one transition into sleep. Whereas if you were manually actively engaged in driving, then only about half the participants even had a transition. In the top right here, we have their self-rated sleepiness. So they said that they felt sleepier when they were in that just supervising the self-driving condition. And on the bottom right, we have the lapses in attention on that reaction time vigilant attention task. So they had more lapses in attention when they were in the self-driving vehicle condition. So just a reminder that they did both of these drives on the same day. So they came into the lab with the same sleep-wake history and did both drives, counterbalanced order across participants, of course. But what this leads us to infer from this is that the self-driving vehicle is actually unmasking a latent sleepiness in these people. So it's not that they weren't necessarily sleepy in the manual drive, but being actively engaged actually masked that sleepiness. And we did find that based on, so I said they wore that sort of Fitbit thing for 2 weeks beforehand, we found that the amount of sleep that they'd had on average over that 2 weeks actually correlated with the number of transitions from wake to sleep as well. So it was driven by that sort of lack of sleep in this study. And now because it's upside down, I'm going the other way. So to summarize, compared to manually actively controlling a vehicle, just monitoring a self-driving vehicle, participants felt sleepier, they had more transitions into sleep, they transitioned into sleep sooner, and they had slower reaction times. So what does this mean for the future of research and design for autonomous vehicles? How do we keep moving safety forward instead of taking steps backwards? Well, we want to know how this might affect handoffs in terms of during a vehicle. So at the moment, we're sort of at that intermediate automation level where the car can throw up its virtual hands and say, I don't know what to do, you take over. So what happens if the driver is sleepy in that situation? Will they be able to react quickly enough? Will they make a good decision when they do react? And while autonomous vehicles are pretty new in terms of motor vehicles, they've been around a long time in terms of aviation, and our lab focuses a lot on aviation safety at NASA. So we're interested to see how this human systems interaction sort of translates to the cockpit in terms of using or relying on autopilot. And finally, I didn't get to see the previous talk, which I think was maybe talking about some of these potential solutions to this problem, where some sort of in-vehicle monitoring of sleepiness states may be an effective solution for alerting drivers in these situations to pull over. Oh, wait. So this is obviously a very brief snapshot of a big study. It has been published, so if you'd like to read the full paper, you can scan the QR code. But I'd also like to thank all of my co-authors on this research, and I'd like to thank you all for your vigilant attention. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Hilditch. Do we have any questions? Oh, lots of questions. Okay. Damon?
Fascinating study. Thank you so much. Were there information on the volatility of sleep? Because some people sleep 8 hours, and if they slept 7, then it's 1 hour less than their usual, versus someone's perfectly fine with 5 hours of sleep all the time. So was there a study on that as well, or what was it just amount of sleep that they had?
So a few things to unpack there, I guess. That yes, there are differences in sleep need across individuals, but the likelihood that someone is able to perform at their best on less than 6 hours of sleep is very low. So there are people in the population, but it's sort of less than 1% of the entire population. So if you think it's you, it's probably not you, because everyone's thinking, oh, it's me. I can function on that. So I'm talking about functioning at your best as well, right? So some people can still function, but not necessarily at their optimum. So in terms of the amount of sleep that this cohort had in the 2 weeks prior, and this was just natural sleep, we didn't intervene. Usually we are the lab that are sleep depriving people, but we just let them do their thing, and they sleep deprived themselves because they all had an average of 6 hours sleep across those 2 weeks. So we can sort of, while there may be some individual differences in we're beginning to learn about sort of people who are resilient or vulnerable to sleep loss as well. So can you maintain your performance despite that sleep loss? But we don't have that level of detail to sort of be able to tease apart in this group. But as I mentioned, the amount of sleep that people got did correlate with how many transitions into sleep they had.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is about when you want to warn or alert the driver, are you thinking about having kind of physical interaction? Because I'm involved in a couple of research projects. For example, we use vibrotactile to correct the walking, basically, movement of the person. Mm-hmm. And in one of my postdocs in the UK, we work on a kind of actuator for a driver to warn again the person. Mm-hmm. So this is beyond just monitoring. So do you have any idea or anything in this area?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the best method for alerting the driver is, whether it's tactile or audio or visual. I mean, obviously visual is not going to be great if your eyes are closed, but I think the problem is also that you want to be alerting people really early on in that trajectory towards falling asleep. Like, you don't want to get to the point that someone has had a micro sleep and then you're waking them up, because it means that they've probably been sort of glazed over for a while before it gets to that.
Yeah.
But I think there are sort of eye tracking
Yeah.
softwares that can sort of detect those early stages. But I don't know. I'm sort of haven't been as involved in the side of like what's the best way to then
Yeah.
to alert that driver.
Yeah, in that research we had eye tracker, but as you said, visual and audio seems to be not enough.
Mhm.
So it's like we need someone to push the person, say,
Yeah, and I mean,
don't sleep.
if you think about the comparison with rumble strips
Yeah.
on the side of the road, they're
Yeah.
to alert drivers that have gone across, and that's basically a tactile.
And that comes to the area of soft robotics as well. So
Yeah.
we can help.
So I would say though, and something that is the problem with rumble strips also is that when you build into a system something that people can rely on to alert them, they don't try to keep themselves alert in the first place, because it's like, oh, well, it doesn't matter that I'm sleepy because the rumble strips will wake me up. And so you then change the behavior of that person if they know there's a safety net, which is not to say to take away the safety net, but it's still a component to be considered in those kind of countermeasures.
Wonderful. Well, let's have another round of applause for Dr. Hilditch. Thank you. Richard?
Well, I want to thank everybody who came today and all our presenters. Fascinating stuff. We hope that you'll use this opportunity to network. We're running out of time, obviously, but if you stick around, please do network. Thank you, everybody. We do still have one Research Week event at Duncan Hall's courtyard until 2:00. They have the student posters up there if you're interested. But I want to thank everybody who made this possible. Lauren, especially, who's in the back. And the AV team, Anna Francine, Bridget, everybody, the whole team's been working hard all week. Everybody in R&I. Thank you, everybody. I hope everybody's got a really good snapshot of the amazing work that's going on here for faculty, by faculty, staff, and partners. Thank you, and have a good Friday.